Hello, class. This is time cycle, and today we're going to talk about context 3, transformation, and we're going to take a look into archaeology. So, some essential questions. What is archaeology? What is gentleman's archaeology? What effect does that have on historic sites? What is the Native American Graves Protection and Repartition Act? How does that impact archaeology, and what new technologies are they using? So archaeology is the study of humans through the excavation and study of artifacts and remains. And what you're looking at is a typical dig site, and how it works is once a historical area has been identified as such, the site is quartered off usually by strings into sections on a grid, and then you very carefully start digging just in your section. And you just don't dig and look for the big stuff. You dig, and then everything you dig goes through a sifter into a bucket. The dirt goes into the bucket, and then anything you find, you pick out and catalog and give a number and a tag to so that they know exactly where it is. This is old school archaeology. It is still done today, but mostly with more contemporary historical sites than ancient sites. And we'll discuss that why. So, gentleman's archaeology refers to the practice of non-scientific or pseudo-scientific archaeology. And it was a popular hobby during the 1800s. People that were traveling during the Western globalization, the European colonization and taking over everything, they liked to bring home souvenirs. And so they would dig around historical sites like the pyramids and basically loot them. And anything they found interesting, they would haul back home to put in their cabinet of curiosities. Some of them would just sit there as a curiosity or a souvenir. Some of them would be studied, but there was very little actual documentation of how or where they were found. Plus, there were a whole lot of fakes going around. Because the people that lived in Americas didn't have as easy access to sites like Egypt and the pyramids, or some of the other parts of the world over there, that's why they excavated Native American grave mounds. So the impact on historic sites is a lot of things were destroyed, because once everything was looted, be it a mound or a pyramid or whatever, the thing that held everything was seen as kind of unimportant. And they were plowed down for fields. They were made roads on top of. They made houses on top of them. If we're talking Egypt, they took the gold off the top of the big pyramid. Things like that. And what that leaves us with is artifacts without context. We have something that's really cool, but we have no idea where in the world it came from. We have destroyed sites. Okay, these are some ruins of something. We don't know what was here. All the stuff is gone, and we can't really tell much about it without the stuff. It also turned into that ghost story standard that you find in movies and TV and books of it's haunted because it was built on an Indian burial mound. True. And then there were fake artifacts, like the Michigan tablet over here on right, that were planted to prove various points. And the Michigan tablet is associated with Hopewell. When Hopewell was excavated, one of the things that somebody had said, and this is like 1800s, was, gee whiz, it would be nice if they had a written language. And then all of a sudden somebody discovered a tablet with a written language on it. And then they found these other tablets that had this kind of, if you look at it, see if you can figure out the story. Up here we have like this eye in the sky and some people, and there's some animals, and they're hanging out. And then all of a sudden it looks like it's raining really hard, and the people are all like oh no, and there's water all around them. And then all of a sudden you have that eye in the sky, and there is a magic boat on the water with a bird with a little leaf in its mouth. And then all of a sudden underneath it, that magic boat is putting out some animals. And the people are all happy. And the animals, let's see, there's some giraffes. Did giraffes ever exist in North America? No. Okay. So what they did, and there was a series of these tablets that were created on slate, was they put in beliefs from other religions into this cultural site, and people started having all sorts of odd ideas. And then later on, one of the fellows confessed to making these, and then it was scientifically backed up that yes, these are total fakes that are made over on leftover slate from cutting school tablets, which is what you would write on a piece of rock in school because paper was expensive. And yeah, bad information. Fake news. Okay. So down the road in 1990, they passed the Native American Graves Protection and Reportation Act. And what this did was actually a huge thing to Native Americans and everybody else, but really important. First thing, they returned human remains and cultural artifacts to their tribes and cultural owners. So if you look over on the picture, here's a good example. These are Native American remains that were collected by a guy in California who just went around burial sites and dug up people and artifacts. There's a few artifacts in there too, but most of them are people, as you can tell. And then he didn't even bother to keep the people together. He just used the different parts of the body as decorative objects, which in an artistic sense I can kind of appreciate. It's like the famous chapel in Europe that's made out of dead people. But it's very disrespectful to the people that he dug up. The Native American Act also prevented unauthorized excavation of burial and cultural sites. For example, let's go dig up some people and make some art with it, or let's go dig up some pottery and sell it on eBay. It's to prevent the buying and selling of native human remains and artifacts. Yes, that used to be a thing. People used to buy, quote, Indian skulls as decorative objects. And also to establish a protocol for treating accidentally discovered artifacts and remains. So you're building a house and you accidentally dig up a pot, okay? That means that has to be evaluated to see if it's just a one-off, you just found something, or whether it's an authentic artifact in an authentic site. And then things have to happen. So this is super important because remains and artifacts belong to their own cultures and they need to be treated with that kind of respect. So to put it in our context, think if someone dug up your great Aunt Agatha or some family member, and then they looked at her dead body, they took off her earrings and sold them on eBay, and they took her skull and put it on display and decided that the rest of her wasn't really interesting, so they just threw it out. That's really disrespectful. Whatever your belief is, that's disrespectful. So the remains were returned to tribes and the artifacts are returned to tribes, and returned not just from goofy guys like the guy that collected the bones, but also from the major museums and universities. The tribes treated the remains according to their burial rites, which are different for every tribe, and then the artifacts would either be replaced where they were found and reburied, or if that place did not exist anymore, which was the case in some instances, they would be housed in artifact centers where they could then be loaned with permission out to universities and museums for study. But they belong to the tribes. And over here on the right, you see part of this when remains were released by one of the universities and sent to the tribes. The remains are in those boxes. And then you have tribal members with the chiefs and the shamans and the medicine people, plus the other descendants of the people that are in the boxes, going to perform the ceremonies needed to lay them to rest correctly. The impact on archaeology, and the NAGPRA is the abbreviation for the long term. When artifacts are returned to tribes from museums and things, especially if they're going to be reburied or reinterred, they make a copy of that artifact, and they can do that without hurting it. A lot of the things actually that you see in museums, like for example Greek statues, that's not really the Greek statue. That's a cast of the Greek statue. It looks just like it, but it's not really real. New sites that are found are non-invasively explored through modern technology. Accidentally discovered sites have to be tested and evaluated to see how important they are and who they belong to. And field archaeology has changed. You don't take things away from locations unless there's a danger of the location being destroyed. For example, if you find a historic gravesite and it's close to the banks of a river that's rapidly eroding and looks like it's going to wash everything away pretty soon, then things are removed. As you can see here, there's a fencing with signage up because a lot of people may not recognize this as a burial mound, but that's to protect it. My sister in Texas, when they moved to Texas first, they lived in Flower Mound, and it was a Native American burial mound known as Flower Mound that was surrounded by a modern Texas-style subdivision. And the subdivision people got in trouble because they tried to put tennis courts on top of this burial mound, and they were prevented from doing so, much to their dismay. But that's okay. So some of the new technologies, and these are pretty cool. There's magnetometry, which detects magnetic changes in the soil. Anytime you bury something underground, it changes the way the magnetic reaction of things work. That's one way to find dead bodies forensically. There's also ground-penetrating radar that sees what's underground through bouncing off of objects. You can create image scans with it, but basically it tells you that, yes, there's something underground here. Another thing they use in forensics as well. Geochemical surveys are more scientifically technical. They take a small core sample from the earth and analyze it, and because of the way different chemicals react to it and are found, they can kind of tell, okay, livestock was kept in this area because there's a lot of the chemicals that are in cow poop. Farming happened here because you have layers of fertilizer and plant material and fertilizer. Oh, people lived here because there's people poop. And then the new thing, which is super cool, is LiDAR. LiDAR scans and creates 3D images. In 2018, they discovered a whole lost Mayan city, and over on the right, you kind of see the LiDAR image of it. It had pyramids and homes and temples and raised roadways and all sorts of things. That city had been totally lost. You couldn't see it from the air or anything because it was buried under the earth over the years, and then the jungle and forest grew up over it. But a LiDAR-equipped drone was out scanning for, I think it was a forestry site or something where they were intending to lumber, which is not cool. But they detected this and did some more exploration and found this whole huge city. So for your assignment today, you have a choice. They're a little bit complicated, but they're a whole lot of fun. Your first choice, which is the more complicated of the two, but the more delicious of the two, is peanut butter and jelly archaeology. So for this, you're going to need your Chromebook, and there's a video linked that comes from the Hopewell Historic Park. This is their project and their demo. You're going to need 3 slices of bread, some peanut butter or whatever else you want to spread, some jelly or equivalent. So if you don't like peanut butter and jelly, you could do like ham and ketchup or whatever. Except for that might be weird with candy. I guess you could use pickles. Some candy like M&Ms or small bits of candy. Some raisins or a different looking candy to substitute for raisins if you don't like raisins or don't have raisins. Again, if you wanted a meat version, you could use like ham for the peanut butter, some mustard for the jelly, some pickles for the candy, and some tomatoes for the raisins. All right. Anyway, I'm too excited about this. Your directions. You watch the peanut butter and jelly archaeology video and follow along with the directions. You're going to be doing all sorts of strange things to the sandwich, but you can actually eat it at the end. Obviously, you can't do this at school. And you just upload an image of your results. The mangled sandwich is what I'm looking for. The second choice, which doesn't involve as many supplies, it's not as complicated, is bedroom archaeology. You can't do this at school either unless you have a good memory. But your materials, you have traditional drawing materials, your Chromebook, and your bed. And you're going to treat your bed like an archaeological site. And you're going to dig down layer by layer and tell me what it is, all the way to the floor, and draw a diagram. So for example, on my bed, which I have mapped out here in my lovely illustration, we're starting at the top, and actually on the very top, which would be like rocks if you were doing a real archaeological site, I have my regular pillows and my sparkle pillow, which is one of those with the moving sequence. Underneath that is my quilt, which would be equivalent to the grass. Underneath the quilt, I have my first blanket, which would be dirt. And then we start finding the different layers of things. I have underneath the first blanket, I have my electric blanket. Underneath that, I have my 2 layers of sheets, and then a mattress pad, a mattress cover, then the mattress, then a box spring cover, then the box spring and the bed frame. And then under the bed, I have some miscellaneous decorations. That's also where I hide gifts that I get to save up to give to people for Christmas and birthdays and things. My cat is usually underneath the bed. And then there is usually some socks underneath the bed too, because that's just where socks live. Okay? So just start at the top of your bed and dig down through your layers and do a little side slice diagram for this and take a picture and upload it. Okay? Peanut butter or nap time? The choice is yours. I'm so goofy.